Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Victorian Cowboy here, ready to talk about Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter, finale of Season 6. We've got a year before we see new episodes. So, I hope you're as concerned as I am about that, because that's going to be a long wait. And next season is the shortest season, and could potentially be the last season. So, we've got a lot to talk about from tonight's episode, though, before we even get into projections for that. So, this episode starts out with quite a bang and some shock value to boot with that. But, before we get there, spoilers, turn it off if you haven't watched, go watch it. It's a good episode, it's one of the best ones of the season, so I would strongly suggest that. Now, we start out with Cersei and King's Landing and the whole King's Landing storyline right out of the bat. And we get to see everyone preparing for the trials being held that day for Lawrence Tyrell and Cersei Lannister. And we see Lawrence's trial, which isn't much of a trial, seeing as he simply confesses and devotes his life to the faith and gets branded to become a faith militant, which is really brutal to watch and pisses Marjorie off because she wanted her brother to be unmarked. But watching everyone get ready, though, and seeing just the differences, I think this is also the first time that the piano really gets used heavily in the soundtrack for Game of Thrones. And so just hearing that variation added a foreboding to the to that intro, as you see, Cersei getting dressed and the High Sparrow getting dressed, Tommen and all of that. Then we also get to see the little birds at work as well in this beginning before any major things happen, gathering Grandmaster Pycelle and luring Lancel Lannister away. But what happens is none of the main characters, like Qyburn, excuse me, or Cersei, get their hands dirty with this. It's all the little birds that do the work, which is, I think, a really interesting touch, that you have these children murdering people at the whims of the people they look up to. And it just really is unsettling to see children so willingly murder people. And then, of course, blow up the entire city. Which, once you see some of the foreshadowing and know what they're talking about with Dragonfire, which is really cool to watch. Though they kill off a ton of people using that. So they get pretty much the whole Tyrell family and the High Sparrow. Plus they kill off Pycelle. So those are some major players. The only one who escapes is Olenna Tyrell, who actually goes to Dorne to team up with the Martells. And in turn, Varys is there. And so you've got this alliance forming that's going to include several powerful enemies of the Lannisters siding with Daenerys. So that's going to be a really interesting dynamic next season, because we left Martell out of the show. Like, they're in the first episode, and then we don't see them again until about now. So it's nice to see what's happening with that. I just think it was a really long gap to have nothing happen with them, especially when they were so angry to begin with. But I do like the direction they're moving with that. I think it makes sense now with what's happening, that they're forming these alliances to go to war. Of course, timeline-wise, things are really confusing for me, because the timeline moved so rapidly this season. Because you have Olenna already in Dorne, you have Varys in Dorne talking. Then at the end you have Varys with Dany on the ships. You've got Arya, who makes it back to Westeros in time for Jaime to end the Siege of Riverrun and go back to King's Landing. So I'm not quite sure, timeline-wise, how long it takes for this travel to occur. So that's one bit of storytelling that's just got me a little confused overall. But anyway, back to the city and blowing people up. We also see Tommen die, so that fulfills the witch's prophecy about Cersei losing all of her children. But it also hardens Cersei to the point where when she crowns herself king, or queen, excuse me, by Qyburn, who's actually, if you look, wearing the hand of the queen pendant. And Jaime looks in there and sees that shit's gone down. Jaime has this really worried look, because I think he recognizes how cold Cersei has gotten. And that coldness disturbs him. Even though he's kind of the one who started to unlock some of that, with him saying that they're the only two that matter, something in Cersei has snapped. And, of course, for Cersei it's rewarding because she's killed off pretty much everyone who's opposed her so far. Except for the evil, or not the evil, but the female faith militant who was with her, that nun type character, who she's having the Mountain continue to torture, and the Mountain finally takes off his helmet to show he's not exactly an attractive person anymore. There's still a lot of hype though, because we've got Sandor back, we've got the Hound back, so there's still hype for them to eventually face each other to the death, which has to happen now. Like, it's been hyped up way too much and been foreshadowed and been talked about ever since season 1. So we need to see that ultimate battle, because that's going to be something to tune in for. Probably as soon as next season starts up, it'll be in one of the 7 or 8 episodes there. Also, it's really unfortunate in watching that opening scene though with Marjorie, how she recognizes what's happening and nobody believes her, which is really unfortunate for her, to say the least. But even if she had gotten out, there wasn't enough time for them to get anywhere. Like, the whole septum and the streets around it just exploded. We get to see the Freys a little more, and first off, I want to say that Jaime is a wonderful wingman for Bronn. Especially playing the Have You Met Bronn game. That was, I enjoyed that. That was some fun levity, especially after they, basically blew up half of King's Landing. So that was a nice little lighthearted transition. Though you can just tell Jaime's really hating the world he lives in. He dislikes the Freys. When he gets back to King's Landing, he realizes how crazy people have become. And he's making a character turn on his redemption arc, to the point where he's recognizing that he doesn't like the person he's become or the people he hangs out with. So I'm really interested to see what he does there. Also, Arya was giving him the eye because he's on Arya's list. So we'll have to see what happens, because odds are Arya is now filling the role that Lady Stoneheart in the books fills, which is killing everyone who's wronged the Starks. She comes in, she feeds Walder Frey his sons, which is a really old school mythological trait, which is both disgusting and disheartening, and a horrible thing to realize about 10 seconds before you get your throat slit in a rather fitting or enjoyable death to watch, because Walder Frey is one of those characters that has next to no redeeming qualities. We do get to see Sam again, and his storyline I actually like tonight, because we get to see a couple of things. We see the Citadel, which hadn't been seen before, and it's rather awe-inspiring. We see the library, which I love. That library is amazing. It looks awesome. It's got the aesthetic appeal, and it's got knowledge galore. So that's going to be really interesting to see what he can find out there. And then you've got the no-nonsense, sassy secretary in the beginning who's like, well, this is irregular, this is awkward, and then Sam just makes it worse trying to crack jokes with these really bookwormy type people who aren't there to make fun. So his change. Oh, the other cool thing about that scene though is you get to see all the white ravens fly out to know that it's winter, and that was really cool to see, just the sheer number of ravens being sent out. Now from there we move on to what I got last week with Davos throwing the fit over Melisandre after finding Shireen's burned carved stag that he made for her. And it's really heartbreaking to see Davos go through that. Like, the acting is spot on for what he's feeling about Shireen and how much he really did care for her, and how tragic and frustrating her death was for him, and the fact that he couldn't save her, and now he realizes the truth, that they burned a little girl at the stake. So while Jon is merciful by sending her away, Melisandre away, it's still what needed to be done, because she did burn a little girl at the stake, and while she may have raised Jon from the dead, which is a redeeming factor in her case, because Jon's a great character who, as come to find out in the episode, is the daughter of Rhaegar and Lyanna. At least Bran finds that out. It's still not quite enough to redeem her for burning Shireen. So she gets sent away. And of course, you get the nice feel-good moment between Jon and Sansa, where Sansa refers to Jon as a true Stark. And this touching moment with Jon's, and she exchanged the fact that, yes, they are siblings. They care about each other. And the fact that he is a bastard, which he's not Ned Stark's bastard anymore, but none of them know that yet. But the fact that they move past that is really nice. And they get to learn that winter is here and make a joke about Ned and that winter is coming, which is a nice throwback to season 1. And then we do get to see Dany start moving towards Westeros, both in making Daario stay because she needs to form alliances through marriage and she won't have a quote-unquote mistress as Daario running around, even though Daario loves her and loves her very deeply, and it's very clear there where he truly makes the case of he doesn't want anything from her, he just wants to love her. But she makes the diplomatic decision not to bring him, much by herself and with Tyrion's urging. Though it's really interesting to see her admit to Tyrion that she said goodbye to a man who loved her and didn't feel anything. So it makes you question whether she's moving towards madness in the sense that she doesn't feel commitment to anyone, or whether she's doing what the crown requires her to do, or she's becoming more and more sociopathic. Though she does, especially at the end, that smile she has as they're sailing towards Westeros on the ships, really lends to the fact that she knows she's going to conquer, and adds to that power hungriness that she's been exhibiting all season. So that's going to be really interesting, because this is what her storyline's been building towards. Oh, also, Tyrion gets made Hand of the Queen too. So we've got 2 new hands in the realm, and that was just a really touching moment where she pins it to him. Of course, Peter Baelish, back in Winterfell, still trying to get Sansa to marry him, and he wants to be on the throne. which I don't think he's ever going to make it to the throne. He's going to get killed off way too early. Eventually his backstabbing is going to end up coming around and stabbing him in the back. And he's not happy when people decide Jon should be the king of the North. He's very, very displeased with that. But what's awesome is it's Lyanna Mormont who actually gets everyone to rally behind Jon. She is by far one of the strongest and most well-liked characters in this series. And she's only had a few episodes, and she's only 10 years old as a character. So that's really, really fun to see this little girl having more guts than these, 30, 40-year-old warriors are supposed to have. So seeing her really rally behind Jon, and recognizing that he may be a bastard, but it doesn't matter because he is doing what needs to get done. He is someone worthy of following. It's just really a nice touch. But in that scene, you can see Sansa's very pleased with that because she doesn't want the attention. She just wants to have influence in that sphere. But Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, is so frustrated. And Sansa sees his look and knows his intentions. And so hopefully she's going to tell Jon about that, because that may lead to Jon's downfall if it's kept a secret. Which we've already seen his downfall once. I really hope they don't go the route of killing him off again, because that would just be a bit much, I'd say. We do see Bran, and of course Benjen, who's been in 2 episodes now. 2 episodes? Yeah. Doesn't get to do a whole lot. He leaves him at the wall because he can't cross the wall because of the magic that's still there preventing the undead from leaving. So he's going to wage a one-man guerrilla war against them, against the White Walkers. So hopefully he shows up again, because I think his character's super interesting, being undead but being a thinking undead. And I think they sorely misused that, in the sense of he's an interesting character with an interesting story that should be told, seeing as he was dying and then now as undead has been living past the wall fighting the White Walkers. So hopefully they don't leave that out next season. I want to see more of that. But Bran does get the flashback to the Tower of Joy, where everything gets revealed, that yes, Jon is Lyanna's son, and there's some imagery there with the star on the sword and the bloody sheets and whatnot, which I believe comes from the book. I've not yet finished the book, so I cannot be 100% certain. Plus, by now we're moving beyond where the books have been, but the foreshadowing comes from the book. So we get that figured out, and we'll have to see what happens with the Three-Eyed Raven. I want to know how they're going to get past the wall, and then what they're going to do once they're past the wall. Are they going to get back to Winterfell, talk to Jon? We'll have a whole Stark reunion, and Arya will be there, and everybody will hug, everybody will cry, and then it's like, oh shit, we've got the White Walkers to deal with. But it'll be interesting, because now the series or the season ended with us seeing all these different alliances having formed. So you've got the Greyjoys with Sansa. You've got Cersei being queen and having a ton of power now, with Qyburn at her side, which I really like Qyburn. I think he's a great character, and he's a lot of fun, and even he seems to have some reservations about crowning Cersei there. There's a bit of hesitation before he sets the crown down. So I'm wondering, Cersei doesn't have too much longer on the show, I don't think, with how crazy she's getting. It would be really interesting to see if Jaime is the one who ends up putting Cersei down, seeing as he's already put down one Mad King. And if he feels like Cersei's become too much of a sociopath, it would be that, I love you too much to see you do this. Let me end it for you. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think people at least fans really want to see Arya do that. But I think that would be a good trajectory for Jaime's story arc, to eventually have to put down Cersei for being too crazy. As does Dany's coming in with dragons, so we'll have to see how that works once they get to Westeros, which should be very early next season. And then from there, we know the White Walkers are just the other side of the wall, and they've built up an army of wildlings who are now whites, because any wildling that was still alive probably isn't anymore. So we'll have to see where and when they decide to try and bring the wall down, and how they're going to bring the wall down, because in order for them to get through, they have to tear it down. And there aren't enough men at the Castle Black, there aren't enough men along the wall to defend it adequately. And maybe since Jon's in the north and he's taken back excuse me, he's taken back, I've got my Game of Thrones mug, by the way, he's taken back Winterfell. Maybe he can finally send the wall the aid it will need to fight this. At the same time, he's going to need to try and rally some of the other houses, not of the north, to come and help, because there's no way that few of them will take on those undead. Also, one other projection I had made about Sansa being pregnant, now I'm not as sure as that anymore, because while in Battle of the Bastards there were some lines that really kind of cemented that for me, in today's episode the clothing she wore was a little more close-fitting and didn't give her quite the look that she had for the rest of the season, so I'm not sure about that one. And they could still do that, and that would be a really interesting thing for her character to have to deal with. At the same time, it would be another thing for her character to deal with, and she's dealt with quite a bit. So I don't know if the showrunners would want to do that, because there's so many other things to deal with. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that. We will just have to see. I still think it's a possibility, but you'd think that that's something they try and work in to this season finale as just another gut punch. Also, things we haven't seen in this finale, a couple of minor plot points that didn't get dealt with. We don't know what's going on with Jorah. We don't know what's going on at the wall right now with Castle Black. So those are a couple of storylines. We also don't know where Brienne of Tarth is. So we'll have to see where she ends up. I know she was probably heading back to Winterfell, but with the way the storylines have worked out, and with the timeline, if Jaime could go from Riverrun to King's Landing, I'm pretty sure that Brienne could have made it back by the time these episodes happened, because it seems to be several weeks, if not months, have passed since, episode 8. So I'm a little confused at which point in time these story points are happening, because you've got this happening here, which could be happening 3 weeks in advance of what's happening in this storyline over here. So travel and just how people get from point A to point B and what lengths of time it takes, I think that's something that they could work on for consistency and clarity's sake. Just because I'm trying to figure out what's happening when. Because if the White Walkers attack, but we're still 3 weeks behind in King's Landing, it's not going to mesh up. So they need to bring the storylines together. Also, we need to know what the Hound's doing. We haven't seen him since he returned in his couple of episodes. So a couple of those storylines didn't get any sort of point or emphasis in this last episode, but we know they're going to get some focus next season. And like I was saying before, the show's only got 1 to 2 seasons left, and next season they've talked about already being a shorter season. So if it's a shorter season, part of me thinks that means there's not as much story to tell, or we're coming to the end of the story. If we're coming to the end of the story, I'm really hoping we see everything wrapped up in a good not necessarily a good way, but in a fitting way. Seeing as this is a show that doesn't necessarily end with happiness for people, as long as it ends in a fitting way and doesn't necessarily just end with shock value, I think that'll be a good end note. It needs to go out on top and in top form, and not overstay its welcome, that's for sure. Because too many shows that have started well have overstayed their welcome. And something that's on the top, like Game of Thrones, should go out on the top, rather than waiting until it's lost so much of its fan base. That being said, I think this season, especially the last 2 episodes, have really amped up what's going on. And so, with that being amped up, it leaves me excited to see what the next season is supposed to do, or is going to do, because there are these big looming questions of imminent doom coming for them that I'm hoping get answered. So that being said, please leave us comment, or leave me comment, well, I mean, I guess you could leave it for my cats as well. I've got 2 of them that would love to answer your questions. But leave some comments. Tell me what you think is going to happen. What you think about some of the analysis I've done on this episode. Just your thoughts in general. And I'd be happy to respond to them. I know this is the last Game of Thrones video because it's the last Game of Thrones episode, but if I get enough feedback in the comments, I'd be more than willing to make more and address things and talk about it, and talk about speculation, because I really enjoy trying to figure out what might be happening later on. Anyway, if you enjoyed it, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. You liking it lets me know I'm doing well. Give us a dislike if you think that this wasn't a good video or anything like that. But hopefully you liked it. And anyway, make sure that you, as always, have a good one, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you next season.